Cheers. You
Hey,
go. Cheers. Happy Wine Wednesday. Hey, 5 o'clock Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. Carl's Wine Club members, Canadian wine lovers, all of you across the country, welcome. It's Wine Wednesday with Mira and Carl. So, Mira Boucher,
yeah,
good
and
evening.
today's very exciting because we have been hearing about the BC harvest for a while, since this time last year, like last December, when we had a horrendous frost event and people started worrying what's going to happen with the 2023 harvest. And then in June of this year, we found the terrible news that there was something like 50 to 70% devastation amongst the grapevines. Although some winery owners, if they had a really good little spot, didn't get as affected, but many did really badly. So we're seeing all sorts of reports about the 23 harvest. So we thought, what, Carl? We'll do a quick show, invite one, two, three, probably four winemakers to join us today, and learn more about what's going on. So what we can expect in our glass in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, right?
Well, that's exactly it, right? Because 2023 harvest didn't started in July, didn't started in August or in September. Like things start a year prior, things start way before that. That started last year with the fruit sets after harvest last year. So this is a very long process. And what happened in Kelowna does not really necessarily reflect what's happened down in Oliver. What's happened in Lillooet does not necessarily reflect what happened on the Naramata bench. So to have different perspective from different people, and to be honest, what happened in Naramata does not necessarily reflect what happened in Summerland just across the lake. I mean, like it's just so site specific, but sometimes it's completely across the region. So I mean, that's why we have multiple sources who are going to come with us, and instead of doing it like a little bit spot and like bring one person, bring another person, I say, hey, you know what, I had in my head what we've done in the Pan-Canadian Masterclass when we had that panel of discussion and all of these people talking to each other and like interacting. So I was like, it would be fun if we do our harvest report with a bunch of guys, a bunch of winemakers all together, and we're just going to talk about their each and every one, where they grow their grape and what happened with their own production this year. So it's going to be pretty fun. I'm really looking forward to it, because we know now that yes, the crop is going to be really tiny, small production for most of the reason that Mira mentioned. But we also know that we're expecting a really good quality of fruit. So here you go, Mira. Got some.
Yeah, so it was kind of in the news starting in June, July, when people started saying, okay, get your BC wines while you can, because there's a lot of crops that have not just not producing grapes this year, but like have to be replanted in BC. So it'll be really interesting in a couple ways. Hey, Carl, if so many vines were lost, we're going to have to see what will people replant if they replant grapes.
That's a question.
Right?
That's
Maybe
the
we're going to
question,
start to see new different varietals. I don't know, because it gives them kind of a chance. If they had like 30-year-old vines, they're dead now, sadly. Hopefully they're going to replant, but maybe they won't plant the same varietal. So are we going to see a shift? Are we going to see some new exciting things? So that's one thing. And yeah, the other is just probably the 2023 vintage will be very hard to find.
Yeah, but Mother Nature does things sometime in the right order, right? And in a sense that 2022 was such a bumper crop. 2022 was so big that I don't think that the market was ready to have two back-to-back huge crop like we've done. I mean, so yes, now it's really tiny. And like you mentioned, I think the disaster, the big crazy thing, the very devastating part of that, it's the death of the vines. It's the bud damage, you can live with that. But it's when 30, 40, 50% of the vines die. So now that's where you see a shift into the split that you have in terms of grape varietals, because like as you see, like, and I can't wait to talk to these guys, because like some of them, as much, they're all farmers, right? And so I can't wait to pick their brain. And like you mentioned, are they going to replant the same thing? So that is the really exciting question. And there's another question that I'm dying to ask, because there was some wildfire as well. There was some forest fire in the area, so we're going to see if there's anything. I know there's already some tests, lots of tests happen in the last couple months to see the impact. So yeah, there's a lot to ask, and there's a lot to be unfold. So I'm glad it's going to be a fun show. There's a lot of good stuff to chat about, and we have some pretty cool guy who's going to. And unfortunately, yes, I did try to invite a couple women, because we're very open-minded here. It's not because I feel like we're in the hockey world right now, and like no, yes, there was a bunch of women invited to the panel tonight, but it just happened that they couldn't make it. So there's going to be a bunch of guys and Mira. So Mira and the boys are going to chat tonight, 2023 harvest. So we have a very competent panel, and we're going to have some great discussion. But before we start that. Un beau bonjour en français à tout notre monde à travers le pays, toutes les régions francophones du Canada, tous nos amateurs de vin francophones. Un beau bonsoir à tout le monde. C'est mercredi, il est 8 heures heure de l'Est, 5 heures heure du Pacifique. Ce soir, on donne l'état des vendanges de la saison 2023, la saison des récoltes est maintenant terminée. Les raisins sont pressés, les vins sont en barrique, sont en train de fermenter. Les vins sont dans les fermentoires. En tout cas. Donc, on va vous donner un rapport. Comment est la qualité, comment s'est passée la saison. Donc, on reçoit 4 producteurs différents de la Colombie-Britannique. Donc, on vous fait un rapport de la saison 2023 dans la vallée d'Okanagan uniquement, parce qu'en Ontario, ils sont encore en vendange, mais ici, tout est terminé. On était 1 mois à l'avance. Something also we're going to talk about, Mira. It was really freaking early this year. Really, really, really early. So it's going to be exciting. What's in your glass tonight? Mira, what's in your glass tonight? And if you are listening with... Yeah.
So you're asking them. You were asking me?
Well, I'm asking you in planting the seed to move on with a little segment here and asking our listener what's in their glass as well.
Oh, so if you're asking me, it's a 2017 Alluvia from Intersection. And we already know that Daryl, let's see, has McWater's Collection 2017 Meritage. Very nice. And
that's a good one, Daryl. That's a good one.
That's all we know. So yeah, tell us if you are opening some wine tonight, what you're having. Daryl is saying we need more Merlot and Sangiovese because that's his favorite Super Tuscan combo. And then Mike's saying more Montepulciano and Grenache, please. So,
you guys are pretty difficult tonight. Geez, I was hoping for a conversation like Pinot Gris and Merlot and Chardonnay, but no, we're going to talk Sangiovese and Montepulciano. I better give a call to Sal D'Angelo.
Yeah, and Mike has the 18 Cab Franc from Black Market, which is awesome. I think Rob from Black Market is already in the green room, so we'll have him on here.
18, huh? So Mike, you're getting warm up for a Cab Franc marathon, so pretty cool. In my glass here, I have 4 glasses. I have a little new vineyard from Ontario here. It's called Black Bank Hill. It's from the 20 Mile Bench. So I have their Runaway White and Runaway Red. They're $25 tax in, red blend and white blend. So I have both in my glass. I also have a Chardonnay from Westcott, and I have, just like Mira, the Intersection, the Alluvia 2017 vintage, just because just because it's Wednesday, just because my business partner love big and bold red, so decided to crack open one of these beauties. So we're just going to enjoy a fun BC harvest report with our three guests, including well, five guests, including Mira Boucher here, who's going to be part of the panel discussion. We have lots of questions for our guys. So yeah.
Yeah, should we bring them on? So we've got Shay coming on from Code Wines in Okanagan Falls, right?
Shay, Coach. Shay, how's it going?
Oh, he's still on mute. We got Rob from Black Market Wine Company in Caledon, just outside Penticton. We've got Richard De Silva from De Silva Vineyards coming from, well, he's got vineyards all over the Okanagan, so I'm sure he'll have lots of great insights. And we have Mark Simpson coming in from his new winery and vineyards near Oliver in the South Okanagan. So lots of great people.
That's a lot of knowledge right there. That's a lot of knowledge. It's exciting. Mark, good evening. Richard, good evening. Rob, guys, how you guys doing?
Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, absolutely. You're bang on. Mark, how's your sound on your side?
Well, I think I'm okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we're all good.
Richard, how's your sound? Yep, you're bang on. Sounds good. Perfect. Shay, you're on mute?
No, he's off mute.
He's off mute. Perfect. We're all good to go.
Yeah.
So I will try to keep everything organized here and try to do a better job of keeping on focus that I did at the Pan Canadian Masterclass when I went all over the place. So
that wasn't your fault.
No, when we talked about appellations a little too passionately.
No, I guess. I guess.
You never go off on a tangent, do you?
Nah, it's yeah. Anyway, so 2023 harvest report, guys. Funny enough, our counterparts in Ontario are just starting their reds. I was talking with some people today. They're harvesting Merlot today, so yeah, we are pretty early around here. So let me start with Shay. Shay works mostly with Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. So Shay, can you just compare to last year, where 2022 was a big, huge crop? How earlier have you harvested this year compared to last year?
Pretty much a month ahead for us, 3 to 4 weeks. So yeah, we were 90% done before October 1st. So yeah, pretty relaxing vintage compared to last year.
I guess, eh? And so Shay, you work also with Syrah, and my question to you is: were you able to get any Syrah this year?
Yeah, we just a tiny little bit. So last year we picked about 4,000 kilos of Syrah, and this year I picked 347 and was working hard for that last kilo. Hopefully we got enough for one single barrel of Syrah from 23.
Wow, that is pretty crazy. So I'm going to stay with you for another minute, Shay. So Okanagan Falls, can you describe a little bit of how, in general, your 2023 growing season went for you, Shay?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think I'll probably echo a lot of what the rest of the guys are going to share here, but kind of March, April was a little bit cool. And then May, we turned on the beautiful weather, and I think that was the springboard for the season. And that carried right on through right into September and part of October, which just laid the groundwork for the early harvest. But we didn't get the super heat that which was good. So it was warm, but we didn't get the big heat dome effect that we had in 21, which was great. And so, that was kind of how I would sum things up. We had some firsts here. So we had hail for the first time in 7 years. So on top of kind of the winter damage, we had the pleasure of dealing with some good old-fashioned hail, which I haven't seen since my Saskatchewan and Alberta days. So I was a little sad to see that. But yeah, and then and actually trucked along really quite nicely.
In term of quantity, Shay, if you have to give a percentage to your normal crop, are you standing around the valley norm, like 50% reduction, or are you like, is it that kind of percentage on that side?
Yeah, we were down about a third of what we did last year. Of course, that was a huge crop. So I think, on average, like if you average the last 4 or 5 years, we're probably half of what we would, typically see.
There you go. So Mira pulled out a few, but without being like, I sure don't want to be dramatic here on what we're doing, because I think everything happened for a reason. And we have that kind of conversation this afternoon as well. I'm going to bring Richard here in the conversation. Richard, you're located on the Naramata bench, but you oversee vineyard right over the valley. How would you describe your 2023 this year?
Yeah, I think it was actually, hello everybody, by the way. The vintage actually was quite good. I mean, other than the fact that we had the lower crop yields, the temperature, our degree days, I think we're down south are about 50 or so above the norm down south. Naramata, we're, again, a little bit more on the degree days as well for the Naramata and in between as well. So I just think that there wasn't any, major rain events. The temperature was fairly solid. It was, it was fairly warm and steady. And so we didn't have any like really crazy heat spikes, which also sets us back in the growing situation that does happen sometimes. So, if it wasn't for the fact that we had the winter damage, I think it was lining up. Still, the numbers from the vintage are quite good. So I think what's taking I would say a bit of the narrative is the fact that the crop was so down from that winter damage from the previous fall and winter, and so. If we would have had a full fruit set this year, I think we would have had an amazing bumper crop harvest. I think the vintage itself, from a growing perspective, was on point. It was one of the better average growing vintages. It's just the crop load from the fruit set from the previous winter was the issue. So I think. There's two things at play. We have the growing season was fantastic. It was even outside of a bit of the smoke effect that some of us saw down south, and I had a small block down in the Swiss that got affected with smoke taint. But as a growing vintage year was on point. It was just the other issue, which is the damage we were carrying from the previous winter.
Well, I appreciate. Yeah, thanks, Richard. I'll get back to you in a few minutes because you'll bring me to the smoke taint part. And Mark, welcome. Mark, it's great to having you with us. Mark is located in Osoyoos, and we had that conversation a couple weeks ago. So, Mark, what have you learned with the testing that you've done about the smoke taint on your side?
Well, what I've learned in general about smoke taint is it can come and bite you later. So never assume that because you can't detect it now doesn't mean it isn't there. So for that reason, because we had a pretty intense fire here, we made only rosé, and that was also partly because we didn't have much fruit. But I did have some clusters tested by the Friend Laboratory, and they test for 4 molecules. I can't remember what they are, but I have a fancy bar chart I can send to anyone that's interested. But basically, it showed that our the precursors for smoke taint were at close to or below threshold levels. In other words, not really worrisome. And we tested 2 other vineyards which showed similar levels. One in Oliver, near Covert Farms, one of my clients, and then another vineyard from a colleague just down the road. So the conclusion I drew from that was the intensity and proximity of the smoke wasn't bad enough to really affect our crop, but I didn't want to take a chance. Now, if I had 25 tons instead of 7, I probably would have made some red wine, but I would have been really careful with the skin contact and been really easy with putting in any toasted or heavily toasted or medium plus toast into the mix, in the barrel mix. I would have only used, fairly moderately toasted oak. But I think we got away with it. The crop that we really missed this year was tourists, because the smoke scared away the people that come to our tasting room and buy wine. So we're sitting, at the time of year when we should have, some bucks from a fruit crop, and a summer of wine sales, drastically reduced. So that's another crop that we should, mention, because what that means is there's less wine to go around.
It was
So
kind of a
anybody
triple whammy, right? You guys had the winter damage, and then you had the smoke, which was keeping the visitors away, plus creating havoc potentially to the vines and the grapes. And then there was also a rock slide that happened near Summerland. 2 of them actually that shut the highway off, so you couldn't even travel up and down the Okanagan easily for almost half the summer. So it was a pretty rough ride, I think, in many respects for wineries.
Well, there's another effect in play I want to mention, is that we had bud testing done. We brought in Pascal Matavan, who's a pretty sharp guy, to do some bud analysis for it, because that's not something I really know how to do. So he gave us some good data. And the conclusion from that was to leave lots of canes and not be as aggressive with the pruning. And because there's lots of canes, there's lots of canopy. So then we had the extra spanking of powdery mildew pressure because we had such a dense canopy. So the extra canes that were required to leave something viable put us at greater risk for that as well. So there was a whole layer of effects. And because most of the fruit we got was off secondary buds, the cluster size was noticeably reduced. I would say the average cluster weight was 40 to 60% of normal. So we had less clusters, and each one weighed only half of what it should. So our final numbers are, I think, around 7 tons on 4 acres versus last year was high 20s. So that's a pretty big drop. And that number varies from vineyard to vineyard, but everybody took a bath on fruit yield. But our quality was quite good. What we did get was ripe, and Brix was good, and we did get some nice fruit.
Rob, thanks, Mark. Rob, Rob, I just lost Rob for a second here.
He'll come back, hopefully. Hey, I had a quick question for Mark. I'm wondering, Mark, you mentioned the Friend Lab. So Friend is another winery in the Okanagan, famously started by the guy who started Plenty of Fish, Marcus Friend, the website. He sold that for hundreds of millions, and then he's buying up the valley because originally his family, they were farmers. So he wanted to get back to his roots. So I just was curious. So Friend this winery is kind of sharing their lab. Is that the case?
Well, they have their approach to winemaking is to acquire as much technology as they can. So they have all the lab analysis equipment, cross flow machines, all kinds of really nice equipment, which is obviously important in making good wine. And I think in order to offset the cost, they've decided to offer lab services to other wineries to utilize the large investment they've made in their laboratory services. So, I think that's a useful service to the industry. There's other wineries that do that. Arterra has a lab. I think one of Jason Park's wineries has a lab that they offer services. So these are useful things, and analysis is important.
That's super interesting. Great to
I want to bring Rob I want to bring Rob in the conversation here. Thanks for waiting, Rob.
No worries.
You're one of the first one to talk to me about powdery mildew in like right around, I think, June or July, when you're saying like, whoops, that's something that we don't see quite often around here. So, so you're looking at your vineyard. So the home vineyard, your Conviction Ridge vineyard is located in Caledon, BC. So you are on the other side of the lake. And how's your growing season for you?
It was a really good season. I just kind of want to echo what Richard said, that despite, the media seems to be grabbing hold of the dire straits and the winter damage and that sort of stuff. And that is obviously not a great thing. But barring that, this was one of the better growing seasons we've had in a really long time. So I think, we shouldn't let that fall to the shadows, because, although there's going to be a lot less wine made, what's coming out of this vintage is going to be pretty awesome. So I think we need to keep that in the forefront.
So, and because everything was so early, are we looking at vintage who is going to be more offering like some super energetic whites, and maybe the red, we're not sure, but or early or not, the red were so well, right, like everything was on par, and like how would you assess the white versus red quality in here?
I think because of the length and the consistency of the season, it wasn't too hot. We had great warm weather, lots of sunshine, not a lot of rain. The flavors are obviously there for both whites and reds, and so are the phenolics. Like our Merlot is tasting great. The tannins are ripe. The seeds were brown. It was definitely an early season. We were exactly 1 month ahead of when we started last year, and about 3 weeks ahead of when we would normally start. And we had everything in by the third week of September. Everything fully ripe, great sugar levels, great acidity, great pH. It was definitely an early start, but it wasn't exactly a compressed season because we had that consistent weather throughout. Previous years, we've had a late start, then we catch up with some really hot weather or whatever, but this was just a nice, consistent, steady vintage. And I think it's going to be one of the better ones that we're going to see here, at least in recent years.
Richard, Rob, you have also, you're taking over a vineyard down in Oliver, correct? So it's kind of Osoyoos. So how different Osoyoos and Caledon, like a part of 30-minute drive in between both location? Was there a big difference between the two growings, or there was fairly similar?
We were much more affected in the Osoyoos with winter damage than we were here in Caledon. We took a very similar approach to pruning both vineyards, and in that, I mean, we actually left a lot more buds, and we waited as late as possible to do the pruning or the final pruning decisions. But there was just the extent of damage was greater down south than it was here in Caledon. Speaking to quite a few other growers in our immediate area, some of our neighbors, very little damage here actually, which is quite nice. Our yields, I think we were up about 15% on Merlot, which is quite shocking given that was one of the varietals hardest hit throughout the valley. Our Bacchus was on par with last year, which I see as encouraging, because last 2 years for our Bacchus have not been great in terms of yield. And we know we had bud damage based on our sampling. So to come in on par with last year, I actually see that as an encouraging thing. We were down a little bit in Pinot Blanc, which surprised me, because we had the lowest percentage of primary bud death on the Pinot Blanc relative to our other varietals, but we had a much smaller crop on that. So all in all, we were pretty much bang on with our last 2 or 3 years average yields here in Caledon, but not the case for Osoyoos.
So thanks, Rob. Richard, because you are up and down the valley, but your home vineyard is on the Naramata Bench, I think the bench was one of the less affected area across the valley. Am I correct?
Yeah, definitely. To not the extent, for sure. I mean, the Naramata Bench had a decent fruit set. It was an average fruit set for us, so it was on par with our average. I did notice that our fruit set, our Chenin Blanc, was a bit lighter, but nothing drastic. Same with the Sauv Blanc. Pinot Noir, though, was bang on. We had full fruit set. Merlot again, average. So it was an average year for yield. So I think we the lake effect in Naramata. I think that might be true for Rob with Skaha Lake. It is a powerful moderating effect for us. I think that's not usually discussed very often. The lake tends to take these sharp edges that occur on our family farms in Oliver, for example. We would see that if you're on a black sage bench, the extremes there of hot and cold are quite drastic. And I think that came to play this year. You could definitely see that difference. Like if you want to sell black sage vineyards and you were to see what was going on there, it was pretty drastic. You could see where that, whether it was a summertime extreme heat or in the winter extreme cold. And so in specifically for the Naramata bench, you have those extremes are just, those edges are just cut off. And so that's my observation. So fruit set was on par. We're talking a few percent here and there off the numbers, so nothing drastic there. So that was very, that being said, our Syrah block in the Golden Mile got wiped out this year. Our Cab Franc at the Avila Family Vineyard on my cousin's property, that was a complete washout this year too. There was luckily for us, we're on self-rooted at my cousin's property, so we'll have fruit next year. The regrowth was really well. But anyway, that's just kind of what we're seeing. Anyway, the differences between the two places. And I think the lake effect, for those that are not from here, is something that is definitely in play.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The one other thing I'd like to bring up with respect to winter damage is all the talk is about December, the really, really cold snap that happened just before Christmas, and that sucked. It really did. But for bud damage, most of that likely happened in November, not in December. The vines don't instantly acclimate. They don't go dormant as soon as you pick them. It's a process that kind of goes up and down a little bit and then gradually works through the fall to the dead of winter when they're the most hardy. But we had a pretty significant temperature change. I think it's in and around Remembrance Day, where we went from sort of 20 degrees to -10. We had our first major snowfall, and a lot of vineyards still had fruit on the vine. So none of those vines had even started the process of acclimating for winter. And the rule of thumb is -22 plus or minus, depending on varietal, is kind of the threshold for bud death. But that's when that threshold matches when the vine is completely dormant in the deepest part of winter. In November, the vines are not even anywhere near that hardy in terms of their ability to tolerate cold temperatures. So -22 in January, might be the same as -5 in November if the vines aren't hardy. So most winter damage in terms of bud death actually happens in the late fall, early winter, not in the dead of winter. So what happened in December was really salt in the wound. If you've got some buds that were damaged in November, the temperatures that many places in the valley saw are obviously bad for buds, but we're now looking at structural damage to the vines and the death of the vines themselves. So it's not just the cold temperature in December that mattered. I think much of the yield issues were done in November, and the vine death that we're seeing blocks that are completely wiped out, that was likely the cold in December.
That's a great point, Rob. Really, really good point that we often don't talk about. But Mark, I think you were in let's exclude the north of the valley. Okay, let's not talk about Kelowna because there's pretty much nothing up there. I was talking to some people. There's very, very little fruit available up in Kelowna. But down in your area near Osoyoos, I think you were one of the coldest part when that big cold snap happened. So how cold did it went? Like, do you know exactly how where's the degrees clicked at the height of the cold snap? Just to give people an idea.
Yeah, between -27 and -30 around December the 27th. and I know how cold it was because I was here, and I had the good fortune to be having to do some winemaking work later in the year. I'm pretty happy to have everything in the winery now, but that's another story. But I think I want to just touch on Rob's point about the hardening effect, because we did observe a big change from the kind of t-shirt and flip-flop weather in the third week of November, in October, when we picked. And we picked on the 19th of October was our last pick last year, and this year it was 19th of September, so it was a full month difference. But the weather did drop off precipitously from a very warm fall to pretty cold and snow on the ground between around, I think it was around October 26th, the weather really turned. And the same thing is happening right now, because it's snowing in the Soyuz around us, and it's about +5. And like 6 days ago, it was 22 degrees. So I'm similarly worried this year that if we go into sub-zero before the vines have really shut down, then we could have another bout of damage. Now, in our particular case of this vineyard, we have picked quite a while ago, and we watered, and everything's shut down. So I think we'll be okay. But I worry about any cold weather in the next short term could be damaging. So I think both things are in play. But I know for a fact that we're about 3 degrees colder than Oliver on a regular basis, because I look after a vineyard in Oliver, and I'm there with my temperature gun a lot. And so that's a big spread. That's, we're in the desert and it's hot here, and it's hotter and colder than anywhere else most of the time.
So since we're talking about the cold and everything, I've heard, tell me if this is true, guys, that even like half a degree makes a difference if you're in these like dire situations. And this is where a few years ago we saw France with pictures like this, right? Where they were literally lighting fires in the vineyards to try and prevent the kind of damage we saw. Have you guys done such kind of operations, tried things like that? Is there, helicopters or windmills or things that you guys bring in when there is the damage of
well, there is a wind machine next door to us that goes off on a timer, and it's annoying because it wakes you up. But I think wind machine is definitely
circulate the air and create a bit of a pillow there, so it's
Well, there's a few things. The shape of the land is important. If you're in a hollow, the cold air is going to sit. If you're in a well-drained slope, then the cold air is going to drain down to the valley below the vineyard. So anyone that's on flat land or with any kind of a little hollow spot in your vineyard, you're going to get more damage in those hollows. So that's where a wind machine can come into play. And I think wind machines are $35,000 to $50,000, and they can eat up a whole bunch of propane or natural gas or whatever the fuel or diesel in a very short order. So it's a very expensive intervention. And helicopters is the same thing. I've heard of people flying helicopters over their cherries to blow water off, which isn't to do with cold. It's just moisture splits the cherries. And both are pretty drastic interventions.
Richard, do you operate? Oh, Shay, go ahead, Shay.
Oh, you caught a mid-sip.
Sorry, were you? Okanagan Falls, okay, on your side, is there more about bud damage or vine death? Because that's the part I wanna bring with you guys. Now, there's a big difference between bud damage, where during the years, like for the following years, there's no grapes. We're gonna come out, but the vines are not dead. But what I'm hearing is like we have a large amount of vines death. So what is the difference, and how was it in Okanagan Falls, Shay?
Yeah, we were fortunate here. So like our canopy and our vine, our Syrah was the hardest. Obviously, Chard and Pinot were much better. But the vines were quite healthy, so the canopy was great. But to your point, it was bud damage for us, like a lot of people. And each bud actually has 3 buds in it, and there's a primary, secondary, and tertiary. And the primary bud primarily is what gets you the best fruit and the biggest fruit. And so for us, and I think this was mentioned by maybe Mark or Rob or others, for us, I think most of our Syrah this year, it was secondaries. And so clusters were much smaller. Just the fruit load was a lot smaller as a result of that. But the canopy and the vines themselves, yeah, we're very fortunate. We didn't lose any vines here in Oakey Falls. So I think it's much more drastic as you go south and into the Similkameen as far as vine death is concerned.
Richard, what did you can you explain a little bit more? So yeah, for you on your side, the bud damage versus the vine, the damage on the vines, where you're gonna have to replant and restart from all over.
Yeah, so a lot of the plantings that we've been doing have been us propagating our own wood and doing that. And so what I've talked a bit about that with Carl in the past. What we've been doing is looking for unique inside of our vineyards and the locations they are for unique characteristics within those blocks, and then taking that wood and propagating that wood that's showing hardiness, showing resilience, and crop output. And so a lot of the vineyards that you're seeing down south for us are on that. And so what we're seeing is a very, because of that, a kind of a more even. So our Cab Franc, for example, is almost all, we didn't lose almost none of the plants. They all grew. And they'll be actually, we have fantastic 3 or 4 choices to lay down full, pencil, little over pencil thick wood down for crop next year. And we'll probably have a decent crop set next year because of it. So because we self-propagate our own vines, the reason we're doing that is over decades now, we've been identifying, the different plants or vines within those blocks that have been showing to have unique characteristics and repropagating that. And so over time, we have a body of work now that shows, for example, I call it our DSV clone for the Chenin Blanc. It has a specific characteristic now that's kind of unique because we've been continually just taking that wood and repropagating it again, and kind of weeding out maybe some of the genetics that we're not as good in our sites. So because of that, there's a bit of a body of resilience that's been going on since this is going back, I think, from the Checkmate vineyard that we've been going back since the mid 70s now, right? For some of these plants. So
wow.
It's I think there's a risk, as those will know, that if we're doing self-rooted, that phylloxera, which is a problem in Ontario, not necessarily here, that we may be susceptible to that. But we haven't seen any perceptible damage from phylloxera in our vineyards, and we're pretty stringent about any kind of material or equipment coming onto our site that comes from any other vineyards. So
thanks, Richard.
So you don't contaminate whatever it is that they have. I mean, we mentioned powdery mildew was a concern in BC this year, which is not common, although it's very common in Ontario. So yeah, very interesting stuff. Hey, I have a little bit of a bomb to throw into the equation here because I know most people have to go soon. So Carl, is there anything you wanted to ask before I throw in the little sprinkling of mischief?
Oh, you go ahead. I think I got pretty much all of the point that I wanted to touch with all of these guys. So Mira, I'll let you drop the bomb.
Okay. Well, I was just looking and I was just thinking, BC and Ontario, we're doing our Ontario harvest report just like this with a panel of some winemakers from Ontario, but in almost like a month from now, because they're not done harvest yet. Like they're in the thick of things right now. And of course, in Ontario, they do like ice wine. So they go even further down. But what's interesting, is we had an early harvest here in BC and we had a very short crop because of the winter damage, because of the smoke. In Ontario, they have a crazy bumper crop this year, like crazy. They have on the Ontario Wine Growers website, they have something like how many tons? Like 40,000 tons of Riesling and like
3,000 tons of fruit still hanging.
Tons and tons of fruit still even hanging, and some that they're starting to like, you know, it's just gonna rot or whatever. So what's interesting about that is, you know, for someone like me who doesn't know much about grape growing or making wine or provincial legislations or anything like that, people's reaction is just like, well, why doesn't Ontario just share with BC? Like, why don't we ship some wine across the country? It takes a couple days to drive it over, and you know, or crush it there and bring out the juice or something like that. So does anyone want to tell me what are some of the things that are preventing something like that before we go to the US, where we know that you can get cheap, plentiful juice?
Now you're opening a can of worm, Mira. Now you are opening a can of worm. That's for a completely different show. Let's stay inside of our own border.
Another hour? Let's go. Let's unpack this. That's good stuff.
Holy shit, that's gonna get bloody.
I mean, I've been doing, as Carl may know, I've been doing, actually with that fine gentleman there, some footwork, and some footwork is going on in the industry right now concerning this. I think there's, you know, I've talked about the set of producers where we're kind of, there's been a lot of backroom meetings the last couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. We've been in a flurry of discussions going on about what we call land-based wineries based on fruit from their region. And it's a timely discussion, but I think there's some validity there. I think in most countries they have you know, France, the AOC, and in Germany, the VDP, and these kind of regions have wine of Canada. Unfortunately, at the moment, that is a bit of a problem, and there's a lot of multiple layers to that discussion. It's unfortunate though, because I believe there's nothing wrong with I don't think there's anything wrong with me collaborating with another farmer in Canada to produce a wine. The problem is the policies, the auditing system, the way of doing any of this is not there to make sure people aren't cheating. And the other thing is that the different provinces are governed independently as their own policymakers. So I don't know where it became a situation where BC VQA versus, say, Ontario VQA, what should have been, and there's some ancient BC and Canadian liquor law in this. I won't get into that today, but there should have been basically the Canadian VQA. And from that, BC would be a sub-region, and then we'd have sub-regions below that. It'd be like in France, where you have France, and then you have Bordeaux, Burgundy, Languedoc, and then you'd have sub-regions within those regions. That's what would make the most sense. But there's a lot of very bad history with some special interests that created the system we're facing today. And yeah, I think there would be something fantastic there to do, like the gentleman there was talking about pan-Canadian blend. That's legitimately Canadian farmers farming 100% grape from their farm. But unfortunately, and this is the bomb in the room, is the product of Canada and the ICB wines that exist in the shelf and the retail space. That is a problem, because maybe Carl or Mira, I don't know if you guys or your guests know about that, but product of Canada has nothing to do with Canada other than it's packaged here in Canada. In wine producing regions, that category does not exist anywhere else in the world. It's actually illegal. If you say product of France in wine, it needs to be 100% wine, not Spanish wine bottled in France and sold. You would be
you get to jail. You get to jail for that.
And yeah, and so unfortunately, that category was created to create this situation we face. So now we have friends in Ontario that we could collaborate with to do something unique and cool. But because there's confusion, Canadians across the country don't know that actually when they talk about product of Canada, that doesn't mean anything. That wine is most likely has nothing to do with Canada whatsoever, other than the fact that the company that bottled it was probably bottling it in Canada. And so we need to clean that up first.
It's interesting though, Richard, because that labeling issue is mainly a problem if you're buying wine at a liquor store or at Costco or something like that, where you don't know anything about who's actually making the wine. If I'm sitting here in a Zoom call and you, Richard, and someone else in Niagara tells me, no, we made this wine. Let me show you pictures. We made it together. This is where it came from. Here's the vineyard. As a consumer, I trust you. I don't need any special labeling for that. I would just be like, oh, that's cool. Let's do it. I don't need a special VQA to tell me that that's approved or whatever, right? So I think it mainly has to do with, those kinds of labels and things are more important where the consumer is not closely tied with the producer, right? If it's just showing up on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah, and it like it's a Pandora's box. It's a very long-winded discussion. There's a lot of politics involved in it. There's lots of self-interest from most of the big commercial wineries that are in the field, and so unfortunately for all of us, we're dealing with a legacy system that was created to protect special interests of a few very powerful players. And so, if we open the Pandora's box to do that, it opens a floodgate to a lot of other unscrupulous activity. And again, it's probably not for the scope of this discussion, but I would say this, that I'm all for creating a Canada VQA system. I think that makes sense. And then within that, we can then start talking about the different regions, sub-regions, or domains, for example, and go into that discussion. And that, I tell people that when I'm buying wine, if you're Carl's Wine Club, or a wine producer like myself, my passport doesn't say the country of British Columbia on it. It doesn't say my passport the country of Ontario on it. It says the country of Canada. To restrict a farmer like myself from selling my product across the country is part of this issue. And those systems were created to protect certain monopolies that are actually run by the agencies that have been tasked to put policy to create the policy around it. That is the situation that we have. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate. And I love my friends in Niagara. I think they have some special, amazing wines, and I love the energy they have out there. I would love to one day collaborate with one of them on doing something like that. I think that would be kind of really interesting. But let's deal with the dirt in the house first and get our house in order.
Yeah.
So that we can create.
So I'll say one more quick thing.
Mira,
I'll say one more quick thing.
And I want to have the perspective. I want to have the perspective of maybe Rob and Mark and see if he has a second, because I am very intrigued. I knew where Richard was standing, and I have a good idea. But Mira, go ahead, and after that, I would have the perspective of our other guys.
Right. And then let's get back to the harvest and just do a quick recap and let these gentlemen get on with their night. And if you guys have to run, we understand, because we said we'd be done about now or by now. So quick thing is Aldi, they're selling a $14.99 Canadian ice wine. It says VQA Canada on it, which doesn't exist. Okay. It's flying off the shelves all over the United States right now. We don't know where this ice wine came from. Like, who the hell knows if is it even grapes? I don't know.
I'm just going to interject into here. One of the things I've been having some intensive meetings the last few days is exactly that. The problem is right now, the system that is used to verify and create this is broken. It has no ability and real teeth to verify that wine is 100% BC or from anywhere. That to me is absolutely scary, and it's been used as a backdoor by a lot of commercial wineries to sell wine that I'll just say that is unknown source. Okay. It's been going on for decades. I think a lot of consumers don't know that. And we dropped that bomb the other day at a very high level meeting with some very high profile wineries and governance and policymakers in the province the other day at a meeting, and the room went silent. The reason they went silent because they know it's been going on, and our consumers have been hoodwinked by this going on. And I find that that's the biggest travesty. We need to have put teeth into this situation, that you need to verify and prove that your wine is from BC for it to mean anything. Because right now on the shelf, I can go into places on the shelf and find wine that's being claimed to be wines from BC that are not wines from BC. And that is fraud. Well, to be completely honest, that's fraud. And our consumers who think they're supporting us aren't. And so we need that discussion to start. But ultimately, at the end of the day, trust producers that you know and that you have a connection with. People like, say, Carl's Wine Club that are going out and finding small wineries like ours out there. That is a big help. But if there's a wine on the shelf for $14 or $12 or $10, that is not a BC wine. Sorry. That is the situation going on right now. And I think consumers ask questions, ask your store, ask your,
mainly because it would be impossible. It would be impossible to have a wine for that price, given the price of land and labor and doing business in BC. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Rob, is Black Market can produce a $12 wine, Rob?
We can't produce anything for $12.
Come on.
So there's the ice wine selling at Aldi's. It's got a VQA product of Canada, but because there's no Canadian VQA body, no one's going to go after them to say, hey, that's not actually VQA. So
I haven't
go
seen
ahead.
that. You share with me because I would like to drop that in and see what follow that in the rabbit hole. Does it say who the producer is on there anywhere?
I don't have it on that bottle. I just took this from a post about it. So yeah, we'd have to get a label of the back of it. I bet we could find that.
Any other perspective from you guys? Come on, give me some juice here.
Well, I got a little thing.
We're talking about
off topic, but a little bit.
Go ahead, Mark.
We have a challenging situation in our industry, and BC wine growers has asked the government for a few things like changing the 25% requirement for lease their own fruit and reducing the requirement to make 4,500 liters. And those are common sense things that wouldn't change necessarily the integrity of the industry. And the other thing that we'd like to be able to do is have satellite tasting rooms. So the way that liquor is distributed is very prohibition-esque, and the way the government approaches it is still coming from that mindset, controlling criminal activity. So until we see the government seeing winemaking and wine business as economic development versus a controlled substance, like it's a beautiful food as opposed to a drug that has to be tightened down, that's really the change that needs to happen. I got a letter in the mail today from Liquor Control and Licensing Branch, something about drinking in moderation, which is pretty good. But, there's a lot of misinformation about how wine is bad for you. And I think as an industry, we need to grow up to have a mindset where this is a beautiful thing we're doing that creates jobs and makes people happy. And it's not an evil substance that needs to be controlled and tightly regulated. And that's a long way away. But I think that's the shift we need to make as an industry to deal with these challenges. That's a whole other show, but I'll just there's my bomb.
It is, isn't it? Rob, what were you going to say?
So we export a small amount of our wines to Japan, and I can tell you with certainty that it's easier for me to have my wines on a store shelf in Tokyo than it is in Toronto.
It is. Isn't it freaking incredible?
How messed up our regulatory system is in this country.
Wow.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, that's the best. That's the best example right there. Right there. This is our best example. You know what, guys? That's our mission. That's what we do, Mira and I. It's been 3 years. That's where we are pounding the table every day. That's what we try to accomplish. But we can't do it without you. You guys, with your amazing product, your amazing wine, vintage in, vintage out. Just like 2023, we brought a lot of challenges to all of you, but a lot of gift too. So we are thrilled and excited to see what's in our glass next spring and the following years with the 2023 label on you guys. Black Market Wine Company, the Silva Vineyards, Mythology, Cold Wines, all of you guys, thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for sharing your expertise and your experience. And we greatly appreciate all of you.
Thanks
See
for
you
having
down
us.
there later, man.
Cheers.
Nice being with you guys.
Cheers. Have a great night, you guys. Thank you so much.
Right.
So, Carl, if you had to summarize what we just learned, what would you say that is? Because, like, if you had to summarize the vintage in just a few words, what would you say?
I would say small but good. And probably, yeah, small quantity, but great quality. That would be my, and like, I've been talking with Rob a lot and Richard a lot during the summer, and these guys, despite the fact that they all know the tragedy about dead vine across the valley, they were keeping saying, wow, this is going to be a good vintage. This is going to be a good vintage. And more that the summer was going on, and these guys' eyes were getting like so glowing. Like they were glowing about the vintage because the summer we had was close to perfection.
It was.
And
I mean, grapes are a fruit. I mean, you and I walked down the street in, what was that, June, and we tasted the first peaches, and they were just bliss, like gorgeous.
Yeah.
So all the fruits did so well this last year. So it's no surprise that the grapes did really well too. And if the grapes did really well, then I'm sure that the wines are going to be extra special from this vintage. But like we were saying, probably in small quantities. So get them all you
small
can.
quantity. But again, that's maybe the story who've been lost in all that is and it's a tragedy that like all of these lands will have to be replanted and all of that. But if two big vintage back-to-back would have occurred, like we would have a very big problem in our hand. Like some producer, like they didn't have room to put any crushed grape. They didn't have the space for it because 2022, there was fermenting juice all over the place all summer long.
Yeah,
Like
so
talking with people at Esther Creek, how much investment they did at Esther Creek to increase their storage space, to put catwalk and renting trucks to freaking store their juice. Like it's how much? Can you imagine having a second vintage like that? Like
yeah,
at some point,
that's kind of like Mother Nature does know what she's up to, because that's kind of the blessing and the curse of the vintage variation, right? Like you said, you don't usually get 2 or 3 bumper crops in a row. A bumper crop is like that because it's exceptional. And you don't usually get a harvest like we've had this year, where it's a very small, very good, but very small crops. So
exactly. So, but it's exciting. I love these kind of conversation. I just wish we had 2 more hours because we were getting into something pretty freaking spicy. Shit. I was just like, let's keep it going. I had so much.
So we discovered a lot of things. Like we need a whole show on this whole Cross Canada VQA situation. We need a whole show on how do we end these crazy prohibitionist kind of things we've got going on in Canada. That's like nowhere else in the world is wine regulated in the way it is here. And we've got a whole show on, many other aspects of what we talked about, right?
Absolutely. Hey, it was a great show. Thanks for helping us putting all that together, Mira. It was fantastic. We've tasted some great juice there too. What do you think of your 2017 Intersection Alluvia?
It's gorgeous. I was actually just thinking, it's so sad because I think Intersection was one of the wineries that was heavily
heavily affected. Even had a mudslide and a flood, and like they had everything.
Vineyard, right?
Yeah. But I was there a couple weeks ago, and I've tasted some new stuff who are coming up. But by the that's my girl. That's my girl. They're
That
coming
was
up
my
with
favorite one out of the 4 glasses, by the way, the 2017
no
Olivia.
shit. No shit, Charlie. It's the most expensive.
Was it? Oh, so, I mean, it speaks to my heart. There you go.
But Intersection, they just bottled some sparkling wine, the traditional method that they've been working on for a couple years now, and their new Rue Saint Marsan was fun. So they have some good stuff coming in the bottle as well. So they're not dead in the water. I mean, like all of these guys, like they're resilient, and so yeah. So I think that I have to run, Mira. I have to run. I have to run. I have a children. I have a kid that I have to go pick up at school.
Ah, there you go.
So
Well,
yeah,
I'll finish drinking all these glasses. I mean, someone's got to do it, right? So
well, you know what? Don't count me out. I'll be back right away.
that's great. That's great.
There you go.
It's nice to see all you guys, Vicky, Daryl, Mike. We had Jeanette and Danny commenting earlier, and everyone else who was in the VIP room, and I can't see your real name. It's nice to see you guys. Great to have you here, and we can't wait to see you again very soon. We got some exciting things coming up, don't we, Carl? There's the Cab Franc Marathon, November 4th.
Yeah, and the samples are coming in every day. Every single transportation company now, every day they're showing up at the doors with different samples from all over the country.
So next week, if you want a sneak preview, we're featuring Fort Barons, which is a winery in Lillooet, BC, far north, but one of the warmest places in Canada. Really interesting. Great value wines from there. The following week, November 8th, for Wine Wednesday, we're going to do a Sauvignon Blanc report just for Ontario, just for fun.
Just for fun. And but just to get back to Fort Barons, we're doing something we've never done before. We're going to do a full vertical. So we have a vertical of 6 years of Rieslings from Lillooet. It's going to be available. I just tasted the 2018. I'm getting into all of these tasting notes soon, but we're going to have 6 years of Rieslings from Lillooet, BC. We are going to have a mini vertical of Cab Franc and a mini vertical of Meritage. So we're going vertical next week with Fort Barons. When the first time ever, no one ever had access to their library. We're going to be the first one. So it's really freaking exciting.
Yeah. And then after that, it's the Cab Franc Marathon. If you're in the Okanagan, Mike, I know you're going to be here. We'll have an open house the following day in person. And then the following week, November 8th, we're doing the mini Sauv Blanc Ontario Marathon with some winemakers.
Exactly. And we're going to follow with Westcott, Tightrope, and Painted Rock. So, yeah, some great stuff coming up your way. Thanks again to all of our wineries, to our guys who joined us tonight. Richard Da Silva, Rob Ambersley, Mark Simpson, Shea Code, for bringing their expertise into our 2023 BC Harvest Report. So, Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members, all of you guys across the country, have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Cheers.